Okay. Hi, everybody. My name, again, is Carissa Verdorn. I am on staff at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm really excited to have my first, actually, in-person climate conversation, and since March 2020, which is very exciting. We've done some on Zoom, and it's just really special to be in person. So, for the next about 50-ish minutes, we're going to, I'm going to talk about a little bit about how the time together will be, and we'll just get started. So just to start, Minnesota IPL, or MNIPL, is an organization working to build the interfaith climate justice movement. So really working with communities of faith to help engage them in caring for creation, caring for others by taking action on climate. And we started doing these climate conversations about 8 years ago because there was a huge gap that was being observed where 70% of Americans believed that climate change was happening, but only 1 in 3 were actually talking about it. So there was a huge gap in talking about something that's really important to a lot of people and to our future. And so we developed these conversations so that people in faith communities or book clubs or whatever can start to have more heart-based conversations about this topic. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to guide us through that. And we're going to start with something a little unexpected, which is thinking about a story when you felt really connected or alive. So I will give an example story. It's just, a minute long, so really short. And you might not have expected that. It's kind of a strange way to start, but I promise it'll make sense. So my story of feeling really connected and alive was about 6 years ago. I was in Colorado for my cousin's wedding, and my boyfriend, who now is my husband, and my parents and some of my other cousins were there, and there was this huge snowstorm the day of the wedding, and we weren't going to be able to have the wedding in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado on this lake. We had to have it indoors because of this, fluke spring blizzard. So instead, the day of the wedding, my cousin, not the one getting married, but another one, my boyfriend, my parents, and I went to the lake in this blizzard and walked around it. And it was just absolutely sublime of seeing the power of nature and this incredible snow, being with these people that I love and don't get to have them all together that often, and laughing and slipping in the snow. And it made me connected to God, this incredible creator who made this world and these people I loved. And I just felt so alive and connected in so many ways in that moment. So that's my little story of connection. I know you haven't had a ton of time to think about yours, but I'll just give you 30 seconds to think yourself, and then you'll turn to a partner, and you'll have about a minute each to share your story, and then we'll switch, if that makes sense. So I'll set my phone for 30 seconds just to think, and then we'll turn and talk. And hopefully people watching the recording, you can also think about this. About 15 more seconds just to think. Five seconds. Okay, so now I know you're excited to turn. If you need a group of 3, that's fine. It looks like you might need a friend, so maybe you could turn. So just one person go first. After a minute, I'll say switch, and then please switch. I know it's hard, it's really short, but I know you can do it. Go. I can give you a minute and a half. How about that? 90 seconds. 15 seconds, then we'll switch. Okay, my timer was very quiet, but it did go off. So now we'll switch. The other person has 90 seconds to share. And 15 seconds. Then we'll come back. Okay, that time the alarm was a little louder. If you want to wrap up your story. We don't have, we're not going to be able to share the stories themselves, although if one person wants to really briefly share theirs, it could be fun to hear. If not, that's fine. Oh yeah. That's beautiful. So my question now, and you can just popcorn out and I'll write things down. What made these a story of connection for you? I'll just say your example. I mean, like deep memory in a place. So like deep memories, maybe with people you love, right? So people you love. What else? Hmm. Being at one with creation. So almost like being part of something bigger. So awe, yep. And we could put that up there too. What else? Did anyone have a special story of connection that was in their everyday? Or did everyone kind of have a different experience? Hmm. That's awesome. So So even there's connection and beauty in the everyday. So it's both. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe like routine or almost commitment, sort of like you're committed to this beautiful thing. Very nice. Any other ones to add? Ooh. Anything else? Well, these are super beautiful, and I'm gonna put these up so we can keep them in mind as we continue our conversation. And I'll put them here. They're non dangerous for the wall, so don't worry. um, but we will come back to why this is important in a little bit. But I hope that you carry your story or your partner's story with you as we go into talking about climate change, because these connections, these things that really make us human and alive are sometimes what sustain us when we talk about things that are scary and difficult. So my next question is, what do you know about climate change? Popcorn out again. It's happening. Doing it to ourselves. Yep. What do you mean? Yeah. So some of the causes are here. What else? So some of the impacts are extreme weather. What are some examples maybe you've seen in the news or experienced? Flooding? Uh-huh. Hmm. More rain. Can you tell more about that impacting ecosystems? What else? Does anyone know some of the numbers that are being thrown around of how many people might be forced to move by 2050? Hmm. Some people are estimating up to 500 million, which just one connection from Syria, when 5 million people were forced to migrate, to flee from the civil war, which was actually, it wasn't caused by climate change, but, with droughts happening in Syria, lots of farmers were moving from their farms into the city. That kind of sparked existing unrest with the government and led to the Syrian refugee crisis. So if you can imagine 5 million, 500 million, is a lot. What else? What else do you know? So the person who said we've known for a long time, why then? So if it's happening, we're doing it, we've known. Um, what's happening now? It's been politicized. Oops. I spelled it wrong. Okay. So money, it would require like change, sometimes sacrifice. Although I do want to come back to that. What else? What about, so we talked a little bit about the human impact. What else? What do you mean by health impacts? So if we don't have clean air, if we don't have clean water, it hurts our health. And where is air most polluted normally? In cities, and specifically, yeah, so environmental racism, yeah, exactly. Communities of color, communities in poverty are in the communities that have the worst air quality. Yep. What else? There are a lot of things. I have a few other questions. Like, so how is climate change happening? You know, don't have to be a big scientist, but yep. So I'll put just greenhouse gases. So as we emit fossil fuels, you know, I like to think of it as a blanket around the Earth. This is actually an interesting fact that I didn't know. But if you think of the Earth as an apple, our atmosphere is like the skin around the apple. It's just incredibly thin and incredibly, you know, rare, since we don't know of any other planets that have such a thing. And as we emit fossil fuels into the atmosphere, they make that, you know, kind of the ring around the Earth, kind of the blanket that helps us trap heat from the sun, make it thicker so that more heat is trapped and we warm our planet. Does anybody know, what about kind of thinking ahead to the future? Well, when we think about sacrifice is needed to make changes, anybody have any hopeful thoughts about this? You know we need to change if we need to stop emitting fossil fuels, but does it only have to be sacrifice? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, another thing too, so we have a lot of hope in technology to make changes, but also we have a lot of opportunity, right? So what are some of the like maybe technologies that maybe you've heard of or you've seen? Yes. Which actually can lower your electricity bill, which is quite nice. That's not. Mm-hmm. So maybe going into here, uh, need for technology with plastics use. Mm-hmm. So better agriculture practices, which actually make our soil more healthy and more resilient. That's right. One thing I want to add and make sure we have on here, does anybody know a certain number that has been talked a lot about how much warming we can afford, quote unquote? Yeah. Does anybody know 1.5, what that refers to? I see some nods. Anybody want to share? Yes. So I'll just put 1.5 Celsius. This is actually the amount agreed to by world governments in 2016 at the Paris Climate Accords, which is actually really powerful because Pacific Island nations came to the conference and were really telling their story of if you make a goal to only allow 2 degrees of warming, that will ensure that our islands like Samoa and others will, be flooded with we didn't add this with sea level rise. Yeah. Yes. Oh, sure. So stay here. Yes, totally. So actually, these Pacific Island nations banded together and said 1.5 to stay alive. That was kind of their rallying cry. And it was a really incredible feat that for these world governments to agree, okay, we're going to stop our warming at 1.5. We're already at 1.1 degrees Celsius, and we've seen all these things. So yeah, that's our big goal. And we'll see if we hit it right. Any other things that we should add about what we know about climate change? Hmm. And maybe just one example, and if you have one, if you want to share. For example, in the Amazon rainforest, which is being burned, which is emitting, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, those feedback loops are making it now so those trees can't suck in the carbon, and they're actually emitting carbon. So as you burn these trees, the carbon is going. I don't know. That's maybe not a very good feedback loop example. But yeah, we don't know what we're doing, right, with our with our planet. We are, as the scientist says, we are experimenting on the only home we're ever going to have, and we don't know what's going to happen. So with that, how does this make you feel? What else? Yeah. Anyone feel angry? I feel angry, and that's something we didn't. Oops, I spelled angry wrong too. That's something we didn't talk about. Someone mentioned that we've known about this for a long time. Does anyone know why we have not taken the action needed? It is hard to do, yes. Feeling stuck. Well, I'm going to come back to the angry, though. It is hard to do, although, has anyone, yeah, does anyone know anything about Exxon about 30 years ago? And how they actually knew, they have reports saying they knew that climate change was happening, and they were actually planning routes through the Arctic because they were planning for the Arctic to be melted so they could go and drill in the Arctic 30 years ago. But then, at the same time, they're directing their scientists that they pay and everyone to really say, oh, we're not sure, there's a lot of confusion. So yeah, misinformation has been happening for decades because they didn't want to stop drilling. That makes me angry, definitely. Anything else? Okay. Well, we can keep adding to this if you have more, but I will put this right here. So if you look at, terrified, worried, stuck, angry, scared, No wonder we don't like to talk about climate change or think about it, right? These are not things that we want to feel, right? Especially when we don't know what we could do, or we feel alone, or maybe other people aren't feeling those things. And so, one thing that's important is just to recognize that other people at Valley Community have those same fears and thoughts. And you're not alone, right? But we can't just stay here, right? We can't just stay in, we know that things are bad, we feel bad about them, right? We've shared them together. That's critical, but there is so much that we can do together, and that's where for me I do add a little baby hope. Because we are alive in this really incredible moment in human history where the consensus is building in faith communities, in synagogues around the country, everywhere, where people are waking up to what's happening. People are waking up to the fact that there are solutions, and people are understanding we can do something about it. And so, my last kind of group question is, how does your faith, I'm going to write this down actually, because it's kind of long. So, how does your faith, we are all Christians in here. I'm Covenant, which is an offshoot of Lutheran, so, similar, Presbyterian. How does your faith both inform and sustain your response? And this is kind of a, like, what does that mean? So I will explain a little bit. You're going to turn to hopefully a different group, but with COVID, if you feel more comfortable just talking to the person next to you, that's totally fine. But if you do want to talk to someone different, you could move your chair. And we're going to take about 3 minutes just to kind of brainstorm in your small group. Here are some ways to think about it. Either some specific teachings from our Christian faith that could maybe help, think about caring for the earth, or support you in dealing with the unknown or things that are scary, things like that. So faith teachings, or even, well, we'll start with that actually, and then we have kind of a second bonus question. So does that make sense? I know that's a little confusing. Basically, some faith teachings that could help kind of inform how we respond. Does that sound good? Okay, so we'll do, I think, maybe 2 minutes for this, actually, because then we'll have a second question to come back to. So I will set my timer for 2 minutes. You can move your chair if you want, or just talk to the person next to you, and go. We've got about 20 seconds, and then we'll come back. Okay, if you can come back together. So again, I'd love to hear just maybe it's a Bible story, maybe it's something Jesus said, I don't know, maybe it's something else. What did you talk about? Yeah. So this isn't just about escape Earth, when we die, but there's actually teachings of, God wants to restore creation, and we can be part of that. So restoring creation. What else? Hmm. 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 Yeah, you can't really have people taken care of if we don't have a, planet that's healthy to live on. Well, and I think that's an interesting thing, just really quick, even the beauty and complexity of the Bible and how you can hold different things at once. I'll just say super fast, since I want to hear from you. But I've heard from people who say, I don't need to worry about climate change because God would never let that happen to us. God's got us. And for me, I have a different view of God's given us free will. And, God, I want to be a co-creator with God and making a change. But when we think about the horrible things that we have done to each other in our world, um, I don't really see that happening. And yet, how do we also hold, like you said, like God is with us, and what does that mean, um, and how does that sustain us too, that we're not alone? Anything else? Other teachings? Yeah, God called it good, right? And what did God call us to do in Genesis with the earth? Is the word. Yeah. So have dominion and subdue, which you might think, uh-oh, what does that mean? But actually, does anyone know what the original Hebrew word for dominion? I don't actually know what it is, but I know what it means, and it's actually more of a word that is used with God, of like God taking care of us. So like we're meant to take care of the earth and be stewards. Yeah. So I'll just say dominion into stewardship. Like care for. Yeah. What else? Or I could put care for. Oh, a word we use more. Anything else? Well, I think when you said Jesus says take care of each other, I'm just reminded of when Jesus talks about the least of these. So I'll just add this. Just my bonus one, even though I'm not part of your church. But this for me is really one thing that sustains me, because the least of these are the people who will be and are already hurt worst by climate change impacts, whether it's extreme weather or it's famine or drought or all these other things, unrest. And so, Jesus told us to take care of the least of these. So, you know, that's what sustains me. So one other question I have, this is not as, it's sort of related to the Bible or teachings from your faith, but it's more about Valley communities. So I'll just say VCPC, assets. So thinking about your own church community, how is VCPC uniquely positioned to take action in this critical moment in history where we know that we're coming up against some big climate, what's the word? Deadlines, right? We need to be cutting fossil fuels quickly. We need to be limiting warming. We have all this technology. How is your church positioned to engage? And that could be assets like, finances or people who care about this or, things you've already done to care for creation as a church, things like that. What are assets? Some other ones are like relationships you might have or teachings that are really core to your church that can really connect you. Does that make sense? What are some assets that you can bring as a church in this critical time? So again, I will give you 2 minutes. Go. Okay, we've got about 20 seconds left. Okay. Last time coming back together. Hopefully your little one-to-one conversations have been helpful. I find sometimes just taking time to process with somebody, can get juices flowing. So again, it sounds like people are having great ideas. That's great. I'm excited to hear them. No, it's okay. I'm glad there are lots of assets. So what are some assets in your church? People. What do you mean? Okay. So when you say that, you mean like people are engaged, or do you mean the church has kind of a clear infrastructure to connect people? What do you mean? Mm. Yeah. Awesome. Mm. Yeah, so you have successes already to draw on. My church, it's been a 2-year struggle. COVID made it harder, but we just started composting and starting to move away from our styrofoam as well. Sorry, now my throat is dying. What else? Hmm. Well, what's another thing? I'm so sorry. What's another thing at your church that you might have, though? You might not be able to come up with maybe a solar panel, but what are maybe some things people have to help them happen? Money. I mean, that's huge, right? Being able to. Hmm. Yeah, and having a team, sometimes I hear it like, if you don't have a team, it doesn't get done. Like, people might care about something, but unless you have some people who are willing to take the time, you know, people are busy. What other assets? I assume you're, hopefully respected or appreciated in the community, kind of a respected voice. Like, oh, look at what that. I'll just say anecdotally, there's a church on 36 that has solar panels. I don't know if you've seen it in the shape of a cross. And talking with other churches, they refer to that a lot because they drive by and they see it and it makes an impression. Like, if you're a fellow Christian or a person of faith, you notice that. And even if you're not a Christian, you're like, wow, look at that church. Like, churches do kind of have a moral authority and it sometimes makes people stop and take notice and be like, maybe I want that. I guess I shouldn't say authority, but yeah, location near highway. Anything else? It sounds like you also have staff on board, which is a huge asset. Sometimes that can be a big hurdle. So looking at that, we've got a big problem, right? We have big feelings about it, and yet we have incredible teachings and our faith, and we also have incredible assets in this community with which to take action. So with that, I might just put this right here behind me as a good reminder. And it sounds like you have things that have already been done, successes, things to build on, and people with interest and passion in taking other action, which is a huge gift. So with that, we're going to move into action and starting to think about what some of those actions could be. And I'm going to check my time. We've got about 5 minutes, which is great. So I'm just going to make a quick little drawing of a 3-legged stool. because this is our way at MNIPL of thinking about taking climate action. Because sometimes, you might think, okay, I'm going to change my light bulbs to LED, which is very important, right? But sometimes you maybe stop there. And this way of thinking about climate action is hopefully a little more balanced. And so one of the ways that faith communities can take action is practical, right? Putting a solar panel on the roof, reducing your waste, getting LEDs. These are practical ways to stop emitting as many fossil fuels or generating as much waste. And that's really important, right? However, even if Valley Community, was 100% carbon neutral and every person had, whatever, that wouldn't make a dent, unfortunately, in our larger planet. But that's why we don't stop there. Another leg of the stool is systemic. And that's actually using our faith voice, our moral voice, to call on our elected leaders, our people who can actually change the system to make those bigger changes that we can't ourselves. For example, making it so that other people can put solar on their roofs, or maybe solar is the main option for people, or there's something actually happening in Congress right now. There's a big climate bill, going through right now that might pass where electric vehicles will suddenly be much, much cheaper and available for people to buy. So instead of just making your own practical individual change, you can help change the system. Or maybe the system is banning, plastic bags, which we'd mentioned, or things like that. But then the third leg of the stool is really important as well. It's spiritual and relational. Because for us as people of faith, as Christians, leaning into why are we doing this work, and what's sustaining us, and what's connecting us to other people is what will keep us going and bringing in new people, even when things seem hard or scary. And so really prioritizing, like, how does my faith, what does Jesus have to say about caring for creation or caring for others? And how can I talk to other people and bring them into caring about this? That's really essential too, and sometimes that can be forgotten, right? It's not as big as, again, putting on a solar panel. So we like to think, a three-legged stool, it needs all three legs. It can't be unbalanced. You can't just do systemic things only. And so we really get excited when congregations think about either, what is one kind of goal or action they can take in each leg of the stool, or how can they combine all three when they take action. I'll just give one example. A Lutheran church in St. Paul a couple years ago, actually, before COVID, they decided to, a couple in the church, they got rid of all of their gas. They moved to all electric in their 100-year-old home. And it was a big project, it took a lot of time and was hard, but they did it eventually. And they could have just done that and said, we did it. We did our part. We're done, right? But they were part of a green team in their church and were talking about it, relational, and decided to invite the larger church to actually go and visit their home. About 30 people went. The pastor blessed and did a little kind of prayer for all 8 big changes that they did, their stove and things like that. And just helping the community or the church not only learn about practical things they could do, but also connecting, like thinking, oh, my friends from church made these changes, and oh, my pastor is blessing these items, which could seem kind of silly, but was actually really profound, in helping them see this is an act of love. This is an act of living out their faith. And of course, the way that they made it systemic, actually, was this year when we had some Zoom meetings with our Congress people. We helped put together meetings where faith communities got to talk to their Congress people about why they want climate action. The woman in this couple, she actually got to share her story with the congressperson and how they had 30 people come through, tour the home. And that influenced the congressperson of hearing, okay, a church in my district really cares about climate. They did this action. They want me to, make it possible so other people can go electric. So anyway, that's just one framework of thinking about taking climate action. How can you, if you do a practical thing, how can you maybe make it systemic? So you're talking to a decision maker, or how can you bring in other people, or make it spiritual? So I know we're short on time, so I'm going to wrap up really quickly. But going back to our stories of connection at the beginning, when you think about taking action in your church, these are the things that we want people to be feeling, right? We want people to be feeling part of something bigger. We want people to feel like they're helping other people, and being with people that they love, and all those things. So for me, that kind of grounds me in how I want my church to take action, and other churches to take action in living out our values. So a couple next steps that could happen. We at MNIPL offer a certification called Becoming a Climate Justice Congregation, where we can actually talk with your task force about making some concrete goals for the next year on climate action, and we kind of go through what that would look like, and do a couple other, they're pretty simple things. So anyway, if you're interested in becoming or learning more about becoming a climate justice congregation, we capture your stories at the end of a year. We share them out with others, and they're really powerful inspiration for others to take action. So that's one next step. Also, I know you have to go to church, so I'm wrapping it up. But actually, some MNIPL staff are going to Glasgow for the UN climate talks next week. So big systemic leg of the stool. And faith communities actually are bringing prayer squares. So these pieces of fabric you'll see there, writing in Sharpie a prayer or intention or a vision of the future that you want, or whatever, that will actually be displayed in Glasgow for the world leaders. They're going to be sewn together. So if you want to take one, I know we don't have a ton of time, but you could maybe work on it during church. And yes, thank you for the visual. Or I could stick around for a little bit if you want to just work on one really quick, and you'll know that it's being brought to Glasgow for our world leaders to see. And the last thing is there's a petition right there that it's kind of a sign-on letter that will also be brought to world leaders, showing that people of faith want them to take bold action on climate and follow through on their commitments. So those are just a couple next steps. We'll be in touch with the Earth Care Task Force, and just thank you so much for your attention and creating this space together. So thank you.